Chapter 10. Symptoms of amor deliria nervosa. Phase 1. Preoccupation. Difficulty focusing. Dry mouth. Perspiration, sweaty palms. Fits of dizziness and disorientation. Reduced mental awareness. Racing thoughts. Impaired reasoning skills. Phase 2. Periods of euphoria. Hysterical laughter and heightened energy. Periods of despair. Lethargy. Changes in appetite. Rapid weight loss or weight gain. Fixation. Loss of other interests. Compromised reasoning skills. Distortion of reality. Disruption of sleep patterns. Insomnia or constant fatigue. Obsessive thoughts and actions. Paranoia. Insecurity. Phase 3 critical. Difficulty breathing. Pain in the chest, throat, or stomach. Difficulty swallowing. Refusal to eat. Complete breakdown of rational faculties. Erratic behavior. Violent thoughts and fantasies. Hallucinations and delusions. Phase 4 fatal. Emotional or physical paralysis, partial or total. Death. If you fear that you or someone you know may have contracted deliria, please call the emergency line toll-free at 1-800-PREVENT to discuss immediate intake and treatment. I'd never understood how Hannah could lie so often and so easily. But just like anything else, lying becomes easier the more you do it. Which is why when I get home from work the next day and Carol asks me whether I don't mind having hot dogs for the 4th straight night in a row, the result of a shipment surplus at the Stop and Save. We once went a whole 2 weeks having baked beans every day. I say that actually, Sophia Henderson from Street Ann's invited me and some other girls over for dinner. I don't even have to think about it. The lie just comes. And even though I still feel sweat pricking up under my palms, my voice stays calm and I'm pretty sure my face keeps its normal color, because Carol just gives me one of her flitting smiles and says that sounds nice. At 6:30 I get on my bike and head to East End Beach, where Alex and I agreed to meet. There are plenty of beaches in Portland. East End Beach is probably one of the least popular, which of course made it one of my mother's favorites. The current is stronger there than it is at Willard Beach or Sunset Park. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't mind. I've always been a strong swimmer. After that first time when my mother released her arms from around my waist and I felt both the surging panic and the thrill, the excitement, I learned pretty quickly, and by 4 I was paddling out by myself all the way past the breaks. There are other reasons why most people avoid East End Beach, even though it's only a short walk down the hill from Eastern Prom, one of the most popular parks. The beach is nothing more than a short strip of rocky gravel flecked sand. It backs up against the far side of the lab complex, where the storage and waste sheds are, which doesn't make for particularly pretty scenery. And when you swim out at East End Beach you get a clear view of Tukey's Bridge and the wedge of unregulated land between Portland and Yarmouth. A lot of people don't like being so close to the wilds. It makes them nervous. It makes me nervous too, except that there's a part of me, a tiny, little flick of a part, that likes it. For a while after my mom died I used to have these fantasies that she wasn't dead, really, and that my father wasn't dead either, that they had escaped to the wilds to be together. He had gone 5 years before her to prepare everything to build a little house with a wood stove and furniture hewed from tree branches. At some point, I imagined, they would come back and get me. I even imagined my room down to the smallest detail, a dark red carpet, a little red and green patchwork quilt, a red chair. I had the fantasy only a few times before I realized how wrong it was. If my parents had escaped to the wilds it would make them sympathizers, resistors. It was better that they were dead. Besides, I learned pretty quickly that my fantasies about the wilds were just that make-believe, little kitty stuff. The invalids have nothing, no way of trading or getting red patchwork quilts or chairs or anything else for that matter. Rachel once told me that they must live like animals, filthy, hungry, desperate. She says that's why the government doesn't bother doing anything about them, doesn't even acknowledge their existence. They'll die out soon enough, all of them, freeze or starve, or just let the disease run its course, turn them against each other, have them raging and fighting and clawing one another's eyes out. She said as far as we know that's already happened. She said the wilds might be empty now, dark and dead, full of only the rustle and whispers of animals. She's probably right about the other stuff about the invalids living like animals, but she's obviously wrong about that. They're alive, and out there, and they don't want us to forget it. That's why they stage the demonstrations. That's why they let the cows loose in the labs. I'm not nervous until I get to East End Beach. Even though the sun is sinking behind me, it lights the water white and makes everything shimmer. I shield my eyes against the glare and spot Alex down by the water, a long black brushstroke against all that blue. I flash back to last night, to the fingers of one of his hands just pressed against my lower back, so lightly it was like I was only dreaming them, the other hand cupping mine dry and reassuring as a piece of wood warmed by the sun. We really dance too, the kind of dancing that people do at their wedding after the pairing has been formalized, but better somehow, looser and less unnatural. He has his back toward me facing the ocean, and I'm glad. I feel self-conscious as I plod down the rickety, salt-warped stairs that lead from the parking lot to the beach, pausing to unlace and kick off my sneakers, which I carry in one hand. The sand is warm on my bare feet as I set off toward him. An old man is coming up from the water, carrying a fishing pole. He shoots me a suspicious glance, then turns to stare at Alex, then looks at me again and frowns. I open my mouth to say, "He's cured," but the man just grunts at me as he walks past, and I can't imagine he'd bother to call the regulators, so I don't say anything. Not that we'd get in trouble if we were caught. That's what Alex meant when he said, "I'm safe, but I don't want to answer a lot of questions and have my ID number run through SVS and all of that." Besides, if the regulators did haul us all the way out to East End Beach to check out suspicious behavior only to discover it was some cured taking pity on a 17-year-old nobody, they'd definitely be annoyed and guaranteed to take it out on someone. Taking pity. I push the words out of my mind quickly, surprised by how difficult it is to even think them. All day I tried not to worry about why on earth Alex would be so nice to me. I even imagined for one brief, stupid second that maybe after my evaluation I'd get matched with him. I'd had to shunt that got aside too. Alex has already received his printed sheet, his recommended matches. He would have gotten it even before his cure directly after the evaluations. He's not married yet because he's still in school, end of story. But he will be, as soon as he finishes. Of course, then I started wondering about the kind of girl he's been matched with, someone like Hannah. I decided, with bright blonde hair and an irritating ability to make even pulling her hair into a ponytail look graceful, like a choreographed dance. There are 4 other people on the beach, a mother and a child 100 feet away, the mother sitting in a faded fabric folding chair staring blankly toward the horizon while the child, who is probably no more than 3 toddles in the waves, gets knocked over, lets out a shriek of pain, pleasure, and struggles back to her feet. Beyond them a couple is walking, a man and a woman, not touching. They must be married. Both have their hands clasped in front of them, and both look straight ahead, not talking and not smiling either, but calm, as though they are each surrounded by an invisible protective bubble. Then I'm coming up behind Alex, and he turns and sees me, smiles. The sun catches his hair, turns it momentarily white. Then it smolders back to its normal golden brown color. "Hi," he says. "I'm glad you came." I feel shy again, stupid, holding my ratty shoes in one hand. I can feel my cheeks getting hot, so I look down, drop my shoes, turn them over once in the sand with my toe. I said I would, didn't I? I don't mean for the words to come out so harshly, and I wince, mentally cursing myself. It's like there's a filter set up in my brain, except instead of making things better it twists everything around, so what comes out of my mouth is totally wrong, totally different from what I was thinking. Thankfully, Alex laughs. "I just meant that you stood me up last time," he says. He nods toward the sand. "Sit." "Sure," I say, relieved. I feel much less awkward once we're both settled in the sand. There's less chance of falling over or doing something dumb. I draw my legs up to my chest, resting my chin on my knees. Alex leaves a good 2 or 3 feet of space between us. We sit in silence for a few minutes. At first I'm searching frantically for something to say. Every beat of silence seems to stretch into an infinity, and I'm pretty sure Alex must think I'm a mute. But then he flicks a half-buried seashell out of the sand and hurls it into the ocean, and I realize he's not uncomfortable at all. After that I relax. I'm even glad for the silence. Sometimes I feel like if you just watch things, just sit still and let the world exist in front of you. Sometimes I swear that just for a second time freezes and the world pauses in its tilt. Just for a second. And if you somehow found a way to live in that second, then you would live forever. "Tide's going out," Alex says. He chucks another seashell in a high arc, and it just hits the break. I know. The ocean is leaving a litter of pulpy green seaweed, twigs, and scrabbling hermit crabs in its wake, and the air smells tangy with salt and fish. A seagull pecks its way across the beach, blinking, leaving tiny thatched claw prints. My mom used to bring me here when I was little. We'd walk out a little bit at low tide, as far as you can go anyway. Crazy stuff gets stranded on the sand, horseshoe crabs and giant clams and sea anemone. Just gets left behind when the water goes out. She taught me to swim here too. I'm not sure why the words bubble out of me then, why I have the sudden urge to talk. My sister used to stay on the shore and build sand castles, and we would pretend that they were real cities, like we'd swum all the way to the other side of the world to the uncured places. Except in our games they weren't diseased at all, or destroyed, or horrible. They were beautiful and peaceful, and built of glass and light and things. Alex stays silent, tracing shapes in the sand with a finger. But I can tell he's listening. The words tumble on. I remember my mom would bounce me in the water on her hip. And then one time she just let me go. I mean, not for real. I had those little inflatable thing IES on my arms. But I was so scared I started bawling my head off. I was only a few years old, but I remember it, I swear I do. I was so relieved when she scooped me back up. But disappointed too. Like I'd lost the chance at something great, you know. So what happened? Alex tips his head to look at me. You don't come here anymore. Your mom lose her taste for the ocean. I look away, toward the horizon. The bay is relatively calm today. Flat, all shades of blue and purple as it draws away from the beach with a low sucking sound. Harmless. She died, I say, surprised by how difficult it is to say. Alex is quiet next to me and I rush on. She killed herself. When I was 6. I'm sorry, he says so low and quiet I almost miss it. My dad died when I was 8 months old. I don't remember him at all. I think it kind of broke her, you know. My mom, I mean. She wasn't cured. It didn't work. I don't know why. She had the procedure 3 separate times, but it didn't. It didn't fix her. I pause, sucking in a breath, afraid to look at Alex, who is as still and silent next to me as a statue, as a carved piece of shadow. Still, I can't stop speaking. I realize, strangely, that I've never told the story of my mother before. I've never had to. Everyone around me, everyone in school, all my neighbors and my aunt's friends, they all knew about my family already, and my family's shameful secrets. That's why they always looked at me pityingly, from the corner of their eyes. That's why for years I rode a wave of whispering into every room, was slapped with sudden silence when I entered, silence and guilty, startled faces. Even Hannah knew before she and I were desk partners in 2nd grade. I remember because she found me in the bathroom stall crying into a piece of paper towel, stuffing my mouth with it so no one would hear, and she kicked the door right open with a foot and stood there staring. Is it because of your mom? She said, the first words she ever spoke to me. I didn't know there was something wrong with her. I didn't know she was sick. I was too young to understand. I keep my eyes focused on the horizon, a solid thin line, taut as a tightrope. The bay edge is farther from us, and as always I have the same fantasy I did as a child, that maybe it won't come back, maybe the whole ocean will disappear forever, drawn back across the surface of the earth like lips retracting over teeth, revealing the cool, white hardness underneath the bleached bone. If I had known, maybe I could have. At the last second my voice falters and I can't say any more, can't finish the sentence. Maybe I could have stopped it. It's a sentence I've never spoken before, never even allowed myself to think. But the idea is there, looming up solid and unavoidable, a sheer rock face. I could have stopped it. I should have stopped it. We sit in silence. At some point during my story the mother and child must have packed up and gone home. Alex and I are all alone on the beach. Now that the words aren't bubbling, rushing out of me, I can't believe how much I've shared with a next to perfect stranger, and a boy, no less. I'm suddenly, itchingly, squirmingly embarrassed. I'm desperate for something else to say, something harmless, about the tide or the weather, but as usual my mind goes totally blank now that I actually need it to function. I'm afraid to look at Alex. When I finally work up the courage to shoot him a tiny sidelong glance, he's sitting, staring out at the bay. His face is completely unreadable except for a tiny muscle, which flutters in and out at the base of his jaw. My heart sinks. Just like I feared, he's ashamed of me now, disgusted by my family's history, by the disease that runs in my blood. At any second he'll stand up and tell me it's better if he doesn't speak to me anymore. It's weird. I don't even really know Alex, and there's an impassable divide between us, but the idea upsets me anyway. I'm 2 seconds away from jumping up and running away, just so I won't have to nod and pretend to understand, when he turns to me and says, "Listen, Lena. I'm sorry, but..." and gives me that all too familiar look. Last year there was a rabid dog loose on the hill, biting and snapping at everyone, frothing at the mouth. It was half-starved, mangy, flea-riddled, and missing one leg, but still it took 2 cops to shoot it down. A crowd gathered to watch, and I was there. I stopped on the way back from my run. For the first time in my life I understood the look that people had been giving me forever, the same curl of the lip whenever they hear the name Haloway. Pity, yes, but disgust also, and fear of contamination. It was the same way they were looking at the dog while he circled, and snapped and spit. And then a mass exhalation of relief when the 3rd bullet finally took him down, and he stopped twitching. Just when I think I can't take it anymore, Alex reaches over and barely skims my elbow with one finger. "I'll race you," he says, standing up and beating the sand off his shorts. He reaches a hand out to me and helps me up, a smile flickering back on his face. I'm endlessly grateful to him in that second. He's not going to hold my family's past against me. He doesn't think I'm dirty or damaged. He pulls me to my feet, and I think he squeezes my hand once I'm standing. A quick pulse, and I'm startled and happy, thinking of my secret sign with Hannah. "Only if you've got a thing for total humiliation," I say. He raises his eyebrows. So you think you can beat me? I don't think. I know. We'll see about that. He cocks his head to the side. First one to the buoys, then. That throws me. The tide doesn't go out too far in the bay. The buoys are still floating on at least 4 feet of water. You want to race into the bay? Scared? He asks, grinning. I'm not scared, I'm just. Good. He reaches out and brushes my shoulder with 2 fingers. Then how about a little less conversation, and a little more go? He screams out the last word, and takes off at full speed. It takes me 2 whole seconds to launch myself after him, and I'm calling out, no fair. I wasn't ready. And both of us are laughing as we splash through the shallows in our clothes, the little ripples and dips of the ocean floor now exposed by the tide's retreat. Shells crunch under my feet. I get my toe caught in a tangle of red and purple seaweed, and nearly do a faceplant. I push myself off the wet sand with a palm and get my balance again, have almost caught up to Alex when he ducks down and scoops up a handful of wet sand, whirling around to peg me with it. I shriek and duck out of the way, but a bit of it still catches me on the cheek, dribbling down my neck. You are such a cheater. I manage to gasp out of breath from running and laughing. You can't cheat if there are no rules, Alex shoots back over his shoulder. No rules, huh? We're splashing shin deep now and I start palming water at him, making a splatter pattern over his back and shoulders. He turns around, sweeping his arm across the surface of the water, a glittering arc. I twist to avoid it and end up slipping and falling elbow deep, soaking my shorts and the bottom half of my t-shirt, the sudden cold making me gasp. He's still slogging forward, his head craned back, his smile dazzling, his laugh rolling off and away so loud I imagine it dipping past Great Diamond Island and over the horizon reaching all the way to other parts of the world. I scramble up and haul after him. The buoys are bobbing 20 feet ahead of us and the water is at my knees, and then my thighs, and then all the way to my waist, until both of us are half running and half swimming, frantically paddling forward with our arms. I can't breathe or think or do anything but laugh and splash and focus on the bright red bobbing buoys, focus on winning, I have to win, and when we're only a few feet away and he's still in the lead and my shoes are leaden and filled with water, my clothes dragging me down like my pockets have been weighted with stones, without thinking I leap forward and tackle him, wrestling down into the water, feeling my foot connect with his guy as I rocket off of him and reach out to slap the nearest buoy, the plastic shooting away from my hand when I hit it. We must be a quarter mile off the beach, but the tide's still going out so I can stand, the water hitting me at my chest. I raise my arms triumphantly as Alex comes up spluttering water, shaking his head so water pinwheels from his hair. I won, I pant out. You cheated, he says, pushing forward a few more steps and collapsing with both arms behind him, looped over the rope stringing along the buoys. He arches his back so his face is tilted up toward the sky. His t-shirt is completely soaked, and water beads off his eyelashes, trickles down his cheeks. No rules, I say, so no cheating. He turns to me, grinning. I let you win, then. Yeah, right. I splash him a little and he holds up his hands, surrendering. You're just a sore loser. I don't have much practice at it. There's that confidence again, that semi-infuriating easiness of his, the tilt of his head and the smile. But today it's not infuriating. Today I like it, feel like it's somehow rubbing off on me, like if I was around him enough I would never feel awkward or frightened or insecure. Whatever. I roll my eyes and hook one arm over the buoys next to him, enjoying the feel of the current swishing around my chest, enjoying the strangeness of being in the bay with my clothes on, the stickiness of my t-shirt, and the sucking of my shoes on my feet. Soon the tide will turn and the water will come in again. Then it will be a slow, exhausting swim back to the beach. But I don't care. I don't care about anything. I'm not worried about how in a million years I'll explain to Carol why I've come home soaking wet with seaweed clinging to my back and the smell of salt in my hair, not worried about how long I have until curfew, or why Alex is even being nice to me. I'm just happy, a pure, bubbly feeling. Beyond the buoys the bay is dark purple, the waves brushed over with white caps. It is illegal to go beyond the buoys. Beyond the buoys are the islands and the lookout points, and beyond them is open ocean, ocean that leads to unregulated places, places of disease and fear. But for that moment I fantasize about ducking underneath the rope and swimming out. To our left we can see the bright white silhouette of the lab complex, and beyond it, distantly, Old Port, all the docks like gigantic wooden centipedes. To our right is Tukey's Bridge, and the long string of guard huts that runs its length and continues up along the border. Alex catches me looking. Pretty, isn't it? He says. The bridge is mottled gray-green, all coated in backsplash and algae, and it looks like it's keening slightly into the wind. I wrinkle my nose. It looks kind of like it's rotting, doesn't it? My sister always said that someday it would fall into the ocean, just topple right over. Alex laughs. I wasn't talking about the bridge. He tilts his chin just slightly, gesturing. I meant past the bridge. He pauses for just a fraction of a second. I meant the wilds. Beyond Tukey's Bridge is the northern border, located along the far side of Back Cove. As we're standing there, the lights in the guard huts click on one after another, shining out against the deepening blue sky, a sign that it's getting late and I should be going home soon. Still, I can't force myself to leave, even as I feel the water around my chest start to bubble and eddy, the tide turning. Beyond the bridge, the lush greens of the wilds move together in the wind like an endlessly rearranging wall, a thick wedge of green cutting down toward the bay and separating Portland from Yarmouth. From here we can just make out the barest section of it, an empty place marked with no lights, no boats, no buildings, impenetrable and strange and black. But I know that the wilds extend back, go on for miles and miles and miles, all through the mainland, all across the country, like a monster reaching its tentacles around the civilized parts of the world. Maybe it was the race, or beating him to the buoys, or the fact that he didn't criticize me or my family when I told him about my mother, but in that moment the giddiness and happiness is still flowing strong and I feel like I could tell Alex anything, ask him anything. So I say, "Can I tell you a secret?" I don't wait for him to answer. I don't have to, and knowing that makes me feel dizzy and careless. I used to think about it a lot. The wilds, I mean, and what they were like. And the invalids, whether they really existed. Out of the corner of my eye I think I see him flinch slightly, so I press on. I used to sometimes think. I used to pretend that maybe my mom didn't die, you know. That maybe she'd only run away to the wilds. Not that that would be any better. I guess I just didn't want her to be gone for good. It was better to imagine her out there somewhere, singing. I break off, shaking my head, amazed that I feel so comfortable talking to Alex. Amazed and grateful. What about you? I say. What about me, what? Alex is watching me with an expression I can't read. Like I've heard him, almost, but that doesn't make any sense. Did you used to think about going to the wilds when you were little? Just for fun, I mean, like a game. Alex squints, looks away from me, and grimaces. Yeah, sure. A lot. He reaches out and slaps the buoys. None of these. No walls to run into. No eyes. Freedom and space, places to stretch out. I still think about the wilds. I stare at him. Nobody uses words like that anymore, freedom, space. Old words. Still. Even after this. Without meaning to or thinking about it, I reach out and brush my fingers once against the three-pronged scar on his neck. He jerks away from my touch as though I've scalded him, and I drop my hand embarrassed. Lena. He says in the strangest voice, like my name is a sour thing, a word that tastes bad in his mouth. I know I shouldn't have touched him like that. I've overstepped my boundaries, and he's going to remind me of it, of what it means to be uncured. I think I will die of humiliation if he starts to lecture me, so to cover my discomfort, I start babbling. Most cureds don't think about that kind of stuff. Carol, that's my aunt, she always said it was a waste of time. She always said there was nothing out there but animals and land and bugs, that all the talk of invalids was make-believe stuff, kid stuff. She said believing in invalids is the same thing as believing in werewolves or vampires. Remember how people used to say there were vampires in the wilds? Alex smiles, but it's more like a wince. Lena, I have to tell you something. His voice is a little stronger now, but something about his tone makes me afraid to let him speak. Now I can't stop talking. Did it hurt? The procedure, I mean. My sister said it was no big deal, not with all the painkillers they give you, but my cousin Marcia used to say it was worse than anything, worse than having a baby, even though her second kid took, like 15 hours to deliver. I break off, blushing, mentally cursing myself for the ridiculous conversational turn. I wish I could rewind back to last night's party, when my brain was coming up empty. It's like I've been saving up for a case of verbal vomit. I'm not scared though, I nearly scream as Alex again opens his mouth to speak. I'm desperate to salvage the situation somehow. My procedure's coming up. 60 days. It's dorky, huh? That I count. But I can't wait. Lena. Alex's voice is stronger, more forceful now, and it finally stops me. He turns so that we're face to face. At that moment my shoes skim off the sand bottom, and I realize that the water is lapping up to my neck. The tide is coming in fast. Listen to me. I'm not who you think I am. I have to fight to stand. All of a sudden the currents tug and pull at me. It's always seemed this way. The tide goes out a slow drain, comes back in a rush. What do you mean? His eyes shifting gold, amber and animal's eyes search my face, and without knowing why, I'm scared again. I was never cured, he says. For a moment I close my eyes and imagine I've misheard him, imagine I've only confused the shushing of the waves for his voice. But when I open my eyes he's still standing there, staring at me, looking guilty and something else sad, maybe. And I know I heard correctly. He says, I never had the procedure. You mean it didn't work? I say. My body is tingling, going numb, and I realize then how cold it is. You had the procedure, and it didn't work. Like what happened to my mom. No, Lena. He looks away, squinting, says under his breath, I don't know how to explain. Everything from the tips of my fingers through the roots of my hair now feels as if it's encased in ice. Disconnected images run through my head, a skipping movie reel, Alex standing on the observation deck, his hair like a crown of leaves. Turning his head, showing the neat three-pronged scar just beneath his left ear. Reaching out to me and saying, I'm safe. I won't hurt you. The words start rattling out of me again, but I don't feel them, hardly feel anything. It didn't work, and you've been lying about it. Lying so you could still go to school, still get a job, still get paired and matched and everything. But really you're not, you might still be. I can't bring myself to say the word. Diseased. Uncured. Sick. I feel like I'll be sick. No, Alex's voice is so loud it startles me. I take a step back, sneakers slipping on the slick and uneven bottom of the ocean floor, and nearly go under. But when Alex makes a move to touch me, I jerk backward out of his reach. Something hardens in his face, like he's made a decision. I'm telling you, I was never cured. Never paired or matched or anything. I was never even evaluated. Impossible. The word barely squeezes itself out, a whisper. The sky is whirling above me, all blues and pinks and reds swirling together until it looks like parts of the sky are bleeding. Impossible. You have the scars. Scars, he corrects me, a little more gently. Just scars. Not the scars. He looks away then, giving me a view of his neck. 3 tiny scars, an inverted triangle. Easy to replicate. With a scalpel, a penknife, anything. I close my eyes again. The waves swell around me and the motion, the lift and the drop, convinces me I really will throw up, right here in the water. I choke down the feeling, trying to hold back the realization that is battering at the back of my mind, threatening to overwhelm me, fighting back the feeling of drowning. I open my eyes and croak out, how? You have to understand. Lena, I'm trusting you. Do you see that? He's staring at me so intently I can feel his eyes like a touch, and I keep my eyes averted. I didn't mean to, I didn't want to lie to you. How? I repeat, louder now. Somehow my brain gets stuck on the word lie and makes an endless loop. No way to avoid evaluations unless you lie. No way to avoid procedure unless you lie. You must lie. For a moment Alex is silent, and I think he's going to chicken out, refuse to tell me anything more. I almost wish he would. I'm desperate to rewind time, go back to the moment before he said my name in that strange tone of voice, go back to the triumphant surging feeling of beating him to the buoys. We'll race back to the beach. We'll meet up tomorrow, try to wheedle some fresh crabs from the fishermen at the dock. But then he speaks. I'm not from here, he says. I mean, I wasn't born in Portland. Not exactly. He's speaking in the tone of voice that everyone uses when they're about to break you apart. Gentle, kind, even like they can make the news sound better just by speaking in a lullaby voice. I'm sorry, Lena, but your mother was a troubled woman. Like you won't somehow hear the violence underneath. Where are you from? I don't have to ask. I know already. The realization has spilled, overrun me. But a little part of me believes that as long as he doesn't say it, it's not true. His eyes are steady on mine, but he tilts his head back toward the border beyond the bridge to that endlessly moving arrangement of branches and leaves and vines and tangled growing things. There, he says, or maybe I just think he says it. His lips barely move. But the meaning is clear. He comes from the wilds. An invalid, I say. The word feels like it's grating against my throat. You're an invalid. I'm giving him a final chance to deny it. But he doesn't. He just winces slightly and says, I've always hated that word. Standing there I realize something else, that it wasn't a coincidence whenever Carol made fun of me for still believing in the invalids whenever she would shake her head without bothering to look up from her knitting needles. Tick, 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 they went together, flashing metal, and say, I suppose you believe in vampires and werewolves too. Vampires and werewolves and invalids, things that will rip into you, tear you to shreds. Deadly things. I'm suddenly so frightened a desperate pressure starts pushing down in the bottom of my stomach and between my legs, and for one wild and ridiculous second I'm positive that I'm about to pee. The lighthouse on Little Diamond Island clicks on, cuts a wide swath, across the water an enormous, accusatory finger. I'm terrified I'll get caught up in its beam, terrified it will point in my direction, and then I'll hear the whirling of the state helicopters and the megaphone voices of the regulator shouting illegal activity. Illegal activity. The beach looks hopelessly and impossibly remote. I can't imagine how we got out so far. My arms feel heavy and useless, and I think of my mother, and her jacket filling slowly with water. I take deep breaths, trying to keep my mind from spinning, trying to focus. There's no way for anyone to know that Alex is an invalid. I didn't know. He looks normal, has the scar in the right place. There's no way anyone could have heard us talking. A wave lifts and breaks against my back. I stumble forward. Alex reaches out and grabs my arm to steady me, but I twist away from him just as a second round of waves surges over us. I get a mouthful of seawater, feel the salt stinging my eyes, and am momentarily blinded. Don't, I stutter. Don't you dare touch me. Lena, I swear. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't want to lie to you. Why are you doing this? I can't think straight, can hardly even breathe. What do you want from me? Want? Alex shakes his head. He looks genuinely confused and hurt too, as though I'm the one who did something wrong. For a second I feel a flash of sympathy for him. Maybe he sees it on my face that fraction of a second when I let my guard down, because in that moment his expression softens and his eyes go bright as flame, and even though I barely see him move, suddenly he has closed the space between us and he's wrapping his warm hands over my shoulders, fingers so warm and strong I almost cry out and saying, Lena, I like you, okay? That's it. That's all. I like you. His voice is so low and hypnotic it reminds me of a song. I think of predators dropping silently from trees, I think of enormous cats with glowing amber eyes just like his. And then I'm stumbling backward, paddling away from him, my shirt and shoes heavy with water, my heart hammering painfully against my chest, and my breath rasping in my throat. I'm kicking off the ground and sweeping forward with my arms, half running, half swimming as the tide lifts and drags at me, so I feel like I can only creep forward an inch at a time, so I feel like I'm moving through molasses. Alex calls my name, but I'm too afraid to turn my head and see if he's coming after me. It's like one of those nightmares where something's chasing you but you're too afraid to look and see what it is. All you hear is its breath, getting closer and closer. You feel its shadow looming up behind you but you're paralyzed, you know that any second you'll feel its icy fingers closing on your neck. I'll never make it, I think. I'll never make it back. Something scrapes across my shin and I begin to imagine that the bay around me is full of horrible underwater things, sharks and jellyfish and poisonous eels, and even though I know I'm panicking I feel like falling backward and giving up. The beach is still so far and my arms and legs feel so heavy. Alex's voice gets whipped away by the wind, sounding fainter and fainter, and when I finally work up the courage to look over my shoulder I see him bobbing up and down by the buoys. I realize I've gone farther than I got, and at the very least Alex isn't following me. My fear eases up, and the knot in my chest loosens. The next wave is so strong it helps skim me over a steep underwater ridge, drops me to my knees into soft sand. When I struggle to my feet the water hits me just at the waist and I slosh the rest of the way to shore, shivering, grateful, exhausted. My thighs are shaking. I collapse onto the beach, gasping and coughing. From the flames of color licking across the sky over Back Cove, orange, reds, pinks, I'm guessing it's close to sunset, probably around 8 o'clock. Part of me wants to just lie down, spread my arms and stretch out, and sleep all through the night. I feel like I've swallowed half my weight in salt water. My skin stings and there's sand everywhere in my bra and underwear, and between my toes and under my fingernails. Whatever scraped my shin in the water left its mark, a long trickle of blood snakes around my calf. I look up, and for one panicked second I can't find Alex by the buoys. My heart stops. Then I see him, a dark spot cutting quickly through the water. His arms pinwheel gracefully as he swims. He's fast. I haul myself to my feet, grab my shoes, and limp up to my bike. My legs are so weak it takes me a minute to find my balance, and at first I weave crazily up and down the road like a toddler just learning to ride. I don't look back, not once, until I'm at my gate. By then the streets are empty and quiet, night about to fall, curfew about to come down like a giant warm embrace, keeping us all in our places, keeping us all safe. Chapter 11. Think of it this way, when it's cold outside and your teeth are chattering, you bundle up in a winter coat and scarves and mittens to keep from catching the flu. Well, the borders are like hats and scarves and winter coats for the whole country. They keep the very worst disease away, so we can all stay healthy. After the borders went up, the president and the consortium had one last thing to take care of before we could all be safe and happy. The Great Sanitation, sometimes called the Blitz, lasted less than a month, but afterward all the wild spaces were cleared of the disease. We went in there with some old-fashioned elbow grease and scrubbed the problem spots away, just like when your mom wipes the kitchen counters down with a sponge, easy as 1, 2, 3. Sanitation. 1. The application of sanitary measures for the sake of cleanliness or protecting health. 2. The disposal of sewage and waste. Excerpt from Dr. Richard's History Primer for Children, Chapter 1. Here is a secret about my family. My sister contracted the delirium several months before her scheduled procedure. She fell in love with a boy named Thomas, who was also uncured. During the day, she and Thomas spent all their time lying in a field of wildflowers, shielding their eyes against the sun, whispering promises to each other that could never be kept. She cried all the time, and once she confessed to me that Thomas liked to kiss away her tears. Still now, when I think of those days, I was only 8 at the time, I think of the taste of salt. The disease slowly worked its way deeper and deeper inside of her, an animal chewing her from within. My sister couldn't eat. What little we could convince her to swallow came up just as quickly, and I was afraid for her life. Thomas broke her heart, of course, to nobody's surprise. The book of SHHH says, amor deliria nervosa produces shifts in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which result in fantasies and delusions that once revealed, lead in turn to psychic devastation. See effects p. 36. Then my sister did nothing but lie in bed and watch the shadows shift slowly across the walls, her ribs rising up under her pale skin like wood rising through water. Even then she refused the procedure, and the comfort it would give her, and on the day the cure was to be administered it took 4 scientists and several needles full of tranquilizer before she would submit, before she would stop scratching with her long sharp nails which had gone uncut for weeks, and screaming and cursing and calling for Thomas. I watched them come for her, to bring her to the labs. I sat in a corner terrified while she spit and hissed and kicked, and I got of my mom and dad. That afternoon, though I was still more than a decade away from safety, I began to count the months until my procedure. In the end my sister was cured. She came back to me gentle and content, her nails spotless and round, her hair pulled back in a long, thick braid. Several months later she was pledged to an IT tech, roughly her age, and several weeks after she graduated from college they married, their hands linked loosely under the canopy, both of them staring straight ahead as though at a future of days unmarred by worry or discontent or disagreement, a future of identical days, like a series of neatly blown bubbles. Thomas was cured too. He was married to Ella, once my sister's best friend, and now everybody is happy. Rachel told me a few months ago that the two couples often see each other at picnics and neighborhood events, since they live fairly close to each other in the East End. The 4 of them sit, making polite and quiet conversation, with not a soul flicker of the past to disturb the stillness and completeness of the present. That's the beauty of the cure. No one mentions those lost, hot days in the field when Thomas kissed Rachel's tears away and invented worlds just so he could promise them to her, when she tore the skin off her own arms at the thought of living without him. I'm sure she's embarrassed by those days, if she remembers them at all. True, I don't see her that often now, just once every couple of months when she remembers she is supposed to stop by, and in that way I guess you could say that even with the procedure I lost a little bit of her. But that's not the point. The point is that she's protected. The point is that she's safe. I'll tell you another secret, this one for your own good. You may think the past has something to tell you. You may think that you should listen, should strain to make out its whispers, should bend over backward, stoop down low to hear its voice breathed up from the ground from the dead places. You may think there's something in it for you, something to understand or make sense of. But I know the truth, I know from the nights of coldness. I know the past will drag you backward and down, have you snatching at whispers of wind and the gibberish of trees rubbing together, trying to decipher some code, trying to piece together what was broken. It's hopeless. The past is nothing but a weight. It will build inside of you like a stone. Take it from me, if you hear the past speaking to you, feel it tugging at your back and running its fingers up your spine, the best thing to do, the only thing, is run. In the days that follow Alex's confession, I check constantly for symptoms of the disease. When I'm manning the register at my uncle's store, I lean forward on my elbow, keep my hand resting on my cheek so I can crook my fingers back toward my neck and count my pulse, make sure it's normal. In the mornings I take long slow breaths, listening for rasping or hitches in my lungs. I wash my hands constantly. I know the deliria isn't like a cold, you can't get it from being sneezed on, but still, it's contagious. And when I woke up the day after our meeting at East End with my limbs still heavy and my head as light as a bubble and an ache in my throat that refused to go away, my first thought was that I'd been infected. After a few days I feel better. The only weird thing is the way my senses seem to have dulled. Everything looks washed out like a bad color copy. I have to load my food with salt before I can taste it, and every time my aunt speaks to me it seems like her voice has been muted a few degrees. But I read through the book of SHHH, and all the recognized symptoms of deliria, and don't see anything that matches up, so in the end I figure I'm safe. Still, I take precautions, determined not to make one false step, determined to prove to myself that I'm not like my mother, that the thing with Alex was a fluke, a mistake, a horrible, horrible accident. I can't ignore how close I was to danger. I don't even want to think about what would happen if anyone found out what Alex was, if anyone knew that we had stood together shivering in the water, that we had talked, laughed, touched. It makes me feel sick. I have to keep repeating to myself that my procedure is less than 2 months away now. All I have to do is keep my head down and make it through the next 7 weeks and I'll be fine. I come home every evening a full 2 hours before curfew. I volunteer to spend extra days at the store, and I don't even ask for my usual $8 an hour wage. Hannah doesn't call me. I don't call her either. I help my aunt cook dinner, and I clear and wash the dishes unprompted. Gracie is in summer school, she's only in 1st grade, and they're already talking about holding her back, and every night I pull her onto my lap and help her sludge through her work, whispering in her ear, begging her to speak, to focus, to listen, cajoling her, finally, into writing at least half of the answers down in her workbook. After a week, my aunt stops looking at me suspiciously whenever I walk into the house, stops demanding to know where I've been, and another weight eases off me. She trusts me again. It wasn't easy to explain why on earth Sophia Henderson and I would decide on an impromptu swim in the ocean in our clothes, no less just after a big family dinner. Even harder to explain why I came home pale and shaking, and I could tell my aunt didn't buy it. But after a while she relaxes around me again, stops looking at me distrustfully, like I'm some caged-up animal she's worried will go feral. Days pass, time ticks away, seconds click forward like dominoes toppling in a line. Every day the heat gets worse and worse. It creeps through the streets of Portland, festers in the dumpsters, makes the city smell like a giant armpit. The walls sweat and the trolleys cough and shudder, and every day people gather in front of the municipal buildings, praying for a brief blast of cold air whenever the mechanized doors swoosh open because a regulator or politician or guard has to go in and out. I have to give up my runs. The last time I do a full loop outside, I find that my feet carry me down to Monument Square, past the governor. The sun is a high white haze, all the buildings cut sharply against the sky like a series of metal teeth. By the time I make it to the statue, I'm panting, exhausted, and my head is spinning. When I grab the governor's arm and swing myself up onto the statue's base, the metal burns underneath my hand and the world seesaws crazily, light zigzagging everywhere. I'm dimly aware that I should go inside, out of the heat, but my brain is all foggy, and so there I go, poking my fingers around the hole in the governor's cupped fist. I don't know what I'm looking for. Alex already told me that the note he'd left for me months ago must have turned to pulp by now. My fingers come out sticky pieces of melting gum stringing between my thumb and forefinger, but still I root around. And then I feel it slide between my fingers, cool and crisp, folded in a square, a note. I'm half delirious as I open it, but still I don't really expect it to be from him. My hands begin to shake as I read. Lena. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Alex. I don't remember the run home, and my aunt finds me later half passed out in the hallway, murmuring to myself. She has to put me in a bathtub full of ice to get my temperature down. When I finally come to, I can't find the note anywhere. I realize I must have dropped it, and feel half relieved and half disappointed. That evening we read that the time and temperature building registered 102 degrees, the hottest day on record for the summer so far. My aunt forbids me to run outside for the rest of the summer. I don't put up a fight. I don't trust myself, can't be sure my feet won't lead me back down to the governor, to East End Beach, to the labs. I receive a new date for the evaluations and spend my evenings in front of the mirror rehearsing my answers. My aunt insists on accompanying me to the labs again, but this time I don't see Hannah. I don't see anyone I recognize. Even the 4 evaluators are different floating oval faces, different shades of brown and pink, two-dimensional like shaded drawings. I am not afraid this time. I don't feel anything. I answer all the questions exactly as I should. When I am asked to give my favorite color for just the briefest, tiniest of seconds, my mind flashes on a sky the color of polished silver, and I think I hear a word gray whispered quietly into my ear. I say, blue, and everyone smiles. I say, I'd like to study psychology and social regulation. I say, I like to listen to music, but not too loudly. I say, the definition of happiness is security. Smiles, smiles, smiles all around, a room full of teeth. After I'm done, as I am leaving, I think I see a shifting shadow, a flicker in my peripheral vision. I glance up quickly at the observation deck. Of course, it's empty. 2 days later we receive the results of my boards, all passes, and my final score, 8. My aunt hugs me, the first time she has hugged me in years. My uncle pats me on the shoulder awkwardly and gives me the largest piece of chicken at dinner. Even Jenny looks impressed. Gracie rams the top of her head into my leg 1, 2, 3 times, and I step away from her, tell her to stop fussing. I know she's upset that I'll be leaving her. But that's life, and the sooner she gets used to it, the better. I receive my approved matches to a list of 4 names and statistics: age, scores, interests, recommended career path, salary projections, printed neatly on a white sheet of paper with the Portland City crest at its top. At least Andrew Marcus isn't on it. I recognize only one name, Chris McDonald. He has bright red hair and teeth that stick out like a rabbit's. I only know him because once when I was playing outside last year with Gracie, he started chanting, "There goes the retard and the orphan," and without really thinking about what I was doing, I scooped up a rock from the ground and turned around and hurled it in his direction. It caught him on the temple. For a second his eyes crossed and uncrossed. He lifted his fingers to his head, and when he pulled them away they were dark with blood. For days afterward I was terrified to go out, terrified I'd be arrested and thrown in the crypts. Mr. McDonald owned a tech services firm, and was a volunteer regulator besides. I was convinced he would come after me for what I'd done to his son. Chris McDonald. Phineas Johnston. Edward Wong. Brian Scariff. I stare at the names for so long that the letters rearrange themselves into nonsense words, into baby babble. Gone crap just fine won't spill, pick crisp sharp things. In mid-July, when my procedure is only 7 weeks away, it's time to make my decision. I rank my choices arbitrarily, inserting numbers next to names: Phineas Johnston 1, Chris McDonald 2, Brian Scaife 3, Edward Wong 4. The boys will be submitting their rankings too. The evaluators will do their best to match preferences. 2 days later, I receive the official notification. I'll be spending the rest of my life with Brian Scaife, whose hobbies are watching the news and fantasy baseball, and who plans to work in the Electricians Guild, and who can someday expect to make $45,000, a salary that should support 2 to 3 kids. I'll be pledged to him before I begin Regional College of Portland in the fall. When I graduate, we'll be married. At night, I sleep dreamlessly. In the mornings, I wake to fog. Chapter 12. In the decades before the development of the cure, the disease had become so virulent and widespread it was extraordinarily rare for a person to reach adulthood without having contracted a significant case of amor deliria nervosa. Please see statistics, pre-border era. Many historians have argued that pre-cure society was itself a reflection of the disease, characterized by fracture, chaos, and instability. Almost half of all marriages ended in dissolution. Incidents of drug use skyrocketed, as did alcohol-related deaths. People were so desperate for relief and protection from the disease they began widespread experimentation with makeshift folk remedies that were in themselves deadly, consuming concoctions of drugs assembled from common cold medications and synthesized into an extremely addictive and often fatal compound. Please see Folk Cures Through the Ages. The discovery of the procedure to cure deliria is typically credited to Cormac T. Holmes, a neuroscientist who was a member of the initial consortium of new scientists and one of the first disciples of the new religion, which teaches the Holy Trinity of God, science, and order. Holmes was canonized several years after his death, and his body was preserved and displayed in the All Saints Monument in Washington, D.C. See photographs on pp. 210-212. From Before the Border, A Brief History of the United States of America, by E. D. Thompson p. 121. One hot evening toward the end of July, I'm walking home from the Stop and Save when I hear someone call my name. I turn around and see Hannah jogging up the hill toward me. So what? She says as she gets closer, panting a little. You're just going to walk by me now? The obvious hurt in her voice surprises me. I didn't see you, I say, which is the truth. I'm tired. Today we did inventory at the store, unshelving and reshelving packages of diapers, canned goods, rolls of paper towels, counting and recounting everything. My arms are aching, and whenever I close my eyes I see barcodes. I'm so tired I'm not even embarrassed to be out in public wearing my paint-spotted Stop and Save t-shirt, which is about 10 sizes too big for me. Hannah looks away, biting her lip. I haven't spoken to her since that night at the party, and I'm searching desperately for something to say, something casual and normal. It suddenly seems incredible to me that this was my best friend, that we could hang out for days and never run out of things to talk about, that I would come home from her house with my throat sore from laughing. It's like there's a glass wall between us now, invisible but impenetrable. I finally come up with, I got my matches, at the same time that Hannah blurts out, why didn't you call me back? Both of us pause startled, and then again start up at the same time. I say, you called. And Hannah says, did you accept yet? You first, I say. Hannah actually seems uncomfortable. She looks at the sky, at a small child standing across the street in a baggy swimsuit, at the 2 men loading buckets of something into a truck down the street, everywhere but at me. I left you like 3 messages. I never got any messages, I say quickly, my heart speeding up. For weeks I've been pissed that Hannah didn't try to reach out to me after the party, pissed and hurt. But I told myself it was better this way. I told myself Hannah had changed and she probably wouldn't have much to say to me anymore. Hannah is looking at me like she's trying to judge whether I'm telling the truth. Carol didn't tell you that I called. No, I swear. I'm so relieved I laugh. In that second, it hits me just how much I've missed Hannah. Even when she's mad at me, she's the only person who's ever really looked out for me by choice, not because of family obligation and duty and responsibility and all the other stuff that the book of SHHH says is so important. Everyone else in my life, Carol and all my cousins, the other girls at Street Ann's, even Rachel, have only spent time with me because they had to. I had no idea. Hannah doesn't laugh though. She frowns. No worries. It's no big deal. Listen, Hannah. She cuts me off. Like I said, it's no big deal. She crosses her arms and shrugs. I don't know whether she believes me or not, but it's clear that after all, things are different. This isn't going to be some big, happy reunion. So you got matched. Her voice is polite now, and slightly formal, so I take on the same tone. Brian Scaife. I accepted. You. She nods. A muscle flexes at the corner of her mouth, almost imperceptible. Fred Hargrove. Hargrove. Like the mayor. His son. Hannah nods, looks away again. Wow. Congratulations. I can't help sounding impressed. Hannah must have killed at the evaluations. Not that that's any surprise really. Yeah. Lucky me. Hannah's voice is completely toneless. I can't tell if she's being sarcastic. But she is lucky, whether she knows it or not. And there it is, even though we're standing in the same patch of sun-drenched pavement, we might as well be 100,000 miles apart. You came from different starts, and you'll come to different ends. That's an old saying, something Carol used to repeat a lot. I never really understood how true it was until now. This must be why Carol didn't tell me Hannah called. 3 phone calls is a lot of phone calls to forget, and Carol's pretty careful about stuff like that. Maybe she was trying to hurry up the inevitable, skip us both to the ending, the part where Hannah and I aren't friends anymore. She knows that after the procedure, once the past and all our shared history has loosened its grip on us, once we don't feel our memories so much, we won't have anything in common. Carol was probably trying to protect me, in her own way. There's no point in confronting her about it. She won't try and deny it. She'll just give me one of her blank looks and rattle off a proverb from the book of SHHH. Feelings aren't forever. Time waits for no man, but progress waits for man to enact it. You walking home? Hannah is still looking at me like I'm a stranger. Yeah, I say. I gesture to my t-shirt. I figured I should probably get inside before I blind someone with this. A smile flits over Hannah's face. I'll walk with you, she says, which surprises me. For a while we walk in silence. We're not that far from my house, and I'm worried we'll go the whole way back without speaking at all. I've never seen Hannah so quiet, and it's making me nervous. Where are you coming from? I say, just to say something. Hannah starts next to me, as though I've woken her from a dream. East End, she says. I'm on a strict tanning schedule. She presses her arm next to mine. It's at least 7 shades darker than mine, which is still pale, maybe a little more freckled than it is in the winter. Not you, huh? This time she smiles for real. No. Haven't gotten down to the beach very much. I will away a blush. Thankfully, Hannah doesn't notice, or if she does, she doesn't say anything. I know. I was looking for you. You were. I shoot her a look from the corner of my eye. She rolls her eyes. I'm glad to see her attitude is coming back online. I mean, not actively. But I've been down there a few times, yeah. Haven't seen you. I've been working a lot, I say. I don't add to avoid East End, actually. You still running? No. Too hot. Yeah, me too. Figured I'd give it a rest until fall. We walk a few more paces in silence, and then Hannah squints at me, tilting her head. So what else? Her question catches me off guard. What do you mean, what else? That is what I mean. I mean, what else? Come on, Lena. It's the last summer, remember? The last summer of no responsibilities and all that good stuff. So what have you been doing? Where have you been? Nothing. I haven't done anything. This was the whole point, to stay out of trouble, to do as little as possible, but saying the words makes me feel kind of sad. The summer seems to be narrowing rapidly, shrinking down to a fine point, before I've even had a chance to enjoy it. It's already almost August. We'll have another 5 weeks of this weather before the wind starts cutting in at night and the leaves get trimmed with edges of gold. What about you? I say. Good summer so far. The usual. Hannah shrugs. I've been going to the beach a lot, like I said. Been babysitting for the Farrells some. Really? I wrinkle my nose. Hannah's always had a thing against children. She's always staying there too sticky and clingy, like Jolly Ranchers that have been left too long in a hot pocket. She makes a face. Yeah, unfortunately. My parents decided I needed to practice managing a household, or some crap like that. You know, they're actually making me work out a budget. Like figuring out how to spend $60 a week is going to teach me about paying bills, or responsibility or something. Why? It's not like you'll even have a budget. I don't mean to sound bitter, but there it is, the difference in our futures cutting between us again. We go silent after that. Hannah looks away, squinting slightly against the sunlight. Maybe I'm just feeling depressed about how quickly the summer is cycling by, but memories start coming thick and fast, like a deck of cards being reshuffled in my head. Hannah swinging open the bathroom door that first day in 2nd grade, folding her arms as she blurted out, "Is it because of your mom?" Staying up past midnight, one of the few times we were ever allowed to have a sleepover, giggling and imagining amazing and impossible people for our matches someday, like the President of the United States or the stars of our favorite movies. Running side by side, legs beating in tandem on the pavement like the rhythm of a single heartbeat. Body surfing at the beach and buying triple cones of ice cream on the way home, arguing about whether vanilla or chocolate was better. Best friends for more than 10 years, and in the end it all comes down to the edge of a scalpel, to the motion of a laser beam through the brain, and a flashing surgical knife. All that history and its importance gets detached, floats away like a severed balloon. In 2 years and 2 months Hannah and I will pass each other on the streets with nothing more than a nod. Different people, different worlds, two stars revolving silently, separated by thousands of miles of dark space. Segregation has it all wrong. We should be protected from the people who will leave us in the end, from all the people who will disappear or forget us. Maybe Hannah's feeling nostalgic too, because she suddenly comes out with, remember all our plans for this summer. All the things we said we'd finally do. I don't even skip a beat. Break into the Spencer prep pool. And go swimming in our underwear, Hannah finishes. I crack a smile. Hop the fence at Cherry Hill Farms. And eat the maple syrup straight out of the barrels. Run all the way from the hill to the old airport. Ride our bikes down Suicide Point. Try and find that rope swing Sarah Miller told us about. The one above Fore River. Sneak into the movie theater and see 4 movies back to back. Finish off the Hobgoblin Sundae at Maze. I'm fully smiling now and Hannah is too. I start quoting a gargantuan sundae for enormous appetites only, featuring 13 scoops, whipped cream, hot fudge. Hannah jumps in, and all the toppings your little monsters can handle. Both of us laugh. We've probably read that sign 1,000 times. We've been debating making a second attack on the Hobgoblin since 4th grade. That's when we tried the first time. Hannah insisted on going there for her birthday and took me along. Both of us spent the rest of the night rolling around on the floor of her bathroom, and we'd only made it through 7 of the 13 scoops. We've reached my street. A few kids are playing in the middle of the road. It's a makeshift game of soccer. They're kicking a can around and shouting, bodies brown and shiny with sweat. I see Jenny among them. As I'm watching, a girl tries to elbow her out of the way, and Jenny turns around and pushes her to the ground. The younger girl starts to wail. No one comes out of any of the houses, even as the girl's voice crescendos to a high-pitched scream like a siren going off. A curtain or a dish towel flutters in a window. Other than that, the street is silent, motionless. I'm desperate to keep riding the wave of good feeling to fix things between Hannah and me, even if it's only for a month. Listen, Hannah, I feel like I'm working the words past an enormous lump in my throat. I'm almost as nervous as I was before the evaluations. They're playing The Defective Detective in the park tonight. Double feature, Michael Wynn. We could go if you want. The Defective Detective is this film franchise Hannah and I used to love when we were little, about a famous detective who's actually incompetent, and his dog sidekick. The dog always ends up solving the crimes. A lot of actors have played the lead role, but our favorite was Michael Wynn. When we were kids, we used to pray to get matched with him. Tonight. Hannah's smile falters and my stomach sinks. Stupid, I think. It doesn't matter anyway. It's okay if you can't. No worries. Just an idea, I say quickly, looking away so she won't see how disappointed I am. No, I mean, I want to, but Hannah sucks in a breath. I hate how awkward we both are. I kind of have this party, she corrects herself quickly, this thing I'm supposed to go to with Angelica Marston. My stomach gets that hollowed out feeling. It's amazing how words can do that, just shred your insides apart. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Such bullshit. Since when do you hang out with Angelica Marston? Again, I'm not trying to sound bitter, but I realize I sound like someone's whiny little sister complaining about being left out of a game. I bite my lip and turn away, furious with myself. She's actually not that bad, Hannah says mildly. I can hear it in her voice. She feels sorry for me. This is worse than anything. I almost wish we were screaming at each other again, like we did the day at her house. Even that would be better than her careful tone of voice, the way we're dancing around each other's feelings. She's not really stuck up. Just shy, I guess. Angelica Marston was a junior last year. Hannah made fun of her for the way she wore her uniform. It was always perfectly pressed and spotless, the collar of her button-down turned down exactly, her skirt hitting exactly at the knee. Hannah said Angelica Marston had a stick up her butt because her father was a big scientist at the labs. And she did kind of walk that way, all constipated and careful. You used to hate her, I squeak out. My words don't seem to be asking my brain for permission before popping out of my mouth. I didn't hate her, Hannah says, like she's trying to explain algebra to a 2-year-old. I didn't know her. I always got she was a bitch, you know. Because of her clothes and stuff. But that's all her parents. They're super strict, really protective and stuff. Hannah shakes her head. She's not like that at all. She's different. That word seems to vibrate in the air for a second, different. For a second I have an image of Hannah and Angelica, arms linked trying not to laugh, sneaking through the streets after curfew. Angelica fearless and beautiful and fun just like Hannah. I push the image out of my head. Down the street one of the kids kicks the can hard. It skitters between two dented silver garbage cans that have been set out in the road, a makeshift goal. Half of the kids start jumping up and down, pumping their fists. The others, Jenny included, gesticulate and yell something about offsides. It occurs to me for the first time how ugly my street must look to Hannah. All the houses squished together, half of them missing window panes, porches sagging in the middle like old beaten-down mattresses. It's so different from the clean, quiet streets in West End, from the silent, gleaming cars and the gates and the green hedges. You could come tonight, Hannah says quietly. A rush of hatred overwhelms me. Hatred for my life, for its narrowness and cramped spaces. Hatred for Angelica Marston, with her secretive smile and rich parents. Hatred for Hannah for being so stupid and careless and stubborn, first and foremost, and for leaving me behind before I was ready to be left. And underneath all those layers something else too, some white-hot blade of unhappiness flashing in the very deepest part of me. I can't name it, or even focus on it clearly, but somehow I understand that this other thing makes me the angriest of all. Thanks for the invitation, I say, not even bothering to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. Sounds like a blast. Will there be boys there too? Either Hannah doesn't notice the tone of my voice, which is doubtful, or she chooses to ignore it. That's kind of the whole point, she says, deadpan. Well, and the music. Music. I say. I can't help but sound interested. Like the last time. Hannah's face lights up. Yeah. I mean, no. Different band. But these guys are supposed to be amazing, even better than last time. She pauses, then repeats quietly, you could come with us. Despite everything, this gives me pause. In the days after the party at Roaring Brook Farms, snatches of music seemed to follow me everywhere. I heard it winging in and out of the wind, I heard it singing off the ocean and moaning through the walls of the house. Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding with the notes sounding in my ears. But every time I was awake and trying to remember the melodies consciously, hum a few notes or recall any of the chords, I couldn't. Hannah's staring at me hopefully, waiting for my response. For a second I actually feel bad for her. I want to make her happy, like I always did, want to see her give a whoop and put her fist in the air and flash me one of her famous smiles. But then I remember she has Angelica Marston now, and something hardens in my throat, and knowing that I'm going to disappoint her gives me a kind of dull satisfaction. I think I'll pass, I say. But thanks anyway. Hannah shrugs, and I can tell she's fighting to look like it's no big deal. If you change your mind, she tries to smile, but can't keep it up for longer than a second. Tanglewilde Lane. Deering Highlands. You know where to find me. Deering Highlands. Of course. The Highlands is an abandoned subdivision off Peninsula. A decade ago the government discovered sympathizers and, if the rumors are true, even some invalids living together in one of the big mansions out there. It was a huge scandal and the bust the result of a year-long sting operation. When all was said and done, 42 people had been executed and another 100 thrown in the crypts. Since then Deering Highlands has been a ghost town, avoided, forgotten, condemned. Yeah, well. You know where to find me. I gesture lamely down the street. Yeah. Hannah looks down at her feet, hops from one to the other. There's nothing else to say, but I can't stand to turn around and just walk away. I have a terrible feeling this is the last time I'll see Hannah before we're cured. Fear seizes me all at once, and I wish I could backpedal through our conversation, take back all the sarcastic or mean things that I said, tell her I miss her and I want to be best friends again. But just when I'm about to blurt this out, she gives me a quick wave and says, okay, then. See you around, and the moment collapses in on itself, and with it, my chance to speak. Okay. See you. Hannah starts off down the road. I'm tempted to watch her go. I get the urge to memorize her walk, to imprint her in my brain somehow, just as she is, but as I'm watching her waver in and out of the fierce sunlight, her silhouette gets confused with another one in my head, a shadow weaving in and out of darkness, about to walk off the cliff, and I don't know who I'm looking at anymore. Suddenly the edges of the world are blurring and there's a sharp pain in my throat, so I turn around and walk quickly toward the house. Lena. She calls out to me, just before I reach the gate. I spin around, heart leaping, thinking maybe she'll be the one to say it. I miss you. Let's go back. Even from a distance of 50 feet, I can see Hannah hesitating. Then she makes this fluttering gesture with her hand and calls out, never mind. This time when she turns around she doesn't waver. She walks straight and quickly, turns a corner, and is gone. But what did I expect? That's the whole point, after all, there's no going back. Chapter 13. In the years before the cure was perfected, it was offered on a trial basis only. The risks attached to it were great. At the time, 1 out of every 100 patients suffered a fatal loss of brain function after the procedure. Nonetheless, people swarmed the hospitals in record number, demanding to be cured. They camped outside the laboratories for days at a time, hoping to secure a procedural slot. These years are also known as the miracle years because of the quantity of lives that were healed and made whole and the number of souls brought out of sickness. And if there were people who died on the operating table, they died for a good cause, and no one can lament them. From the Miracle Years, The Early Science of the Cure, A Brief History of the United States of America, by E. D. Thompson p. 87. When I get into the house it's even hotter than usual, a wet suffocating wall of heat. Carol must be cooking. The house smells like brown meat and spices mixed with the normal summer smells of sweat and mildew. It's kind of nauseating. For the past few weeks we've been eating dinner out on the porch, running macaroni salads, cold cuts, and sandwiches from my uncle's deli counter. Carol pokes her head out of the kitchen as I go by. Her face is red, and she's sweating big time. Dark swaths of sweat have left pit stains on her pale blue blouse, navy crescents. Better get changed, she says. Rachel and David will be here any second. I'd completely forgotten my sister and her husband were coming over for dinner. Normally I see Rachel 4 or 5 times a year tops. When I was younger, especially after Rachel had first moved out of Carol's house, I used to count the days until she would come and see me. I don't think I fully understood then about the procedure and what it meant for her, for me, for us. I knew that she'd been saved from Thomas and from the disease, but that was it. I think I got that otherwise things would be exactly the same. I got that as soon as she came to see me it would be like old times again, that we would bust out our socks to have a dance party, or she would pull me onto her lap and start braiding my hair, launch into one of her stories of distant places and witches who could change into animals. But she only skimmed a hand over my head as she came through the door and applauded politely when Carol made me recite my multiplication and division tables. She's grown up now, Carol told me when I asked her why Rachel didn't like to play anymore. Someday you'll see. After that I stopped paying attention to the notation that appeared every few months on the kitchen wall calendar, are to visit. At dinner the big topics of conversation are Brian Scariff, Rachel's husband. David works with Brian's cousin's friend, so David feels like he's an expert on the Family and Regional College of Portland, where I'll be starting in the fall. It's the first time in my life I'll be in class with members of the opposite sex, but Rachel tells me not to worry. You won't even notice, she says. You'll be so busy with work and studying. There are safeguards, says Aunt Carol. All the students are vetted. Code 4, all the students are cured. I think of Alex and almost say, not all of them. Dinner drags on well past curfew. By the time my aunt helps me clear the plates it's almost 11 o'clock and still Rachel and her husband make no sign to leave. That's another thing I'm excited about. In 36 days, I won't have to worry about curfew anymore. After dinner my uncle and David go out onto the porch. David has brought 2 cigars, cheap ones, but still, and the smell of the smoke, sweet and spicy, and just a little bit oily, floats in through the windows, intermingles with the sound of their voices, fills the house with blue haze. Rachel and Aunt Carol stay in the dining room, drinking cups of watered-down boiled coffee, the dirty pale color of old dishwater. From upstairs I hear the sound of scampering feet. Jenny will tease Grace until she's bored, until she climbs into bed sour and dissatisfied, letting the dullness and sameness of another day lull her to sleep. I wash the dishes, many more of them than usual, since Carol insisted on having a soup, hot carrot which we all choked down, sweating, and a pot roast slathered in garlic and limp asparagus, probably rescued from the very bottom of the vegetable bin, and some stale cookies. I'm full, and the warmth of the dishwater on my wrists and elbows plus the familiar rhythms of conversation, the pitter-patter of feet upstairs, the heavy blue smoke make me feel very sleepy. Carol has finally remembered to ask about Rachel's children. Rachel goes over their accomplishments as though reciting a list she has only memorized recently, and with difficulty Sarah is reading already. Andrew said his first word at only 13 months. Raid, raid. This is a raid. Please do as you are commanded, and do not try and resist. The voice booming from outside makes me jump. Rachel and Carol have paused momentarily in their conversation, are listening to the commotion in the street. I can't hear David and Uncle William, either. Even Jenny and Grace have stopped fooling around upstairs. Patchy interference from the street. The sounds of hundreds and hundreds of boots, clicking away in time. And that awful voice, amplified through a bullhorn, this is a raid. Attention, this is a raid. Please be ready with your identification papers. A raid night. Instantly I think of Hannah and the party. The room starts spinning. I reach out, grabbing onto the counter. Seems pretty early for a raid, Carol says mildly from the dining room. We had one just a few months ago, I think. February 18, Rachel says. I remember. David and I had to come out with the kids. There was some problem with SVS that night. We stood in the snow for half an hour before we could be verified. Afterward, Andrew had pneumonia for 2 weeks. She relates this story as though she's talking about some minor inconvenience at the laundromat, like she's misplaced a sock. Has it been that long? Carol shrugs, takes a sip of her coffee. The voices, the feet, the static, it's all coming closer. The raiding parties move as one, from house to house, sometimes hitting every house on a street, sometimes skipping whole blocks, sometimes going every other. It's random. Or at least, it's supposed to be random. Certain houses always get targeted more than others. But even if you're not on a watch list, you can end up standing in the snow, like Rachel and her husband, while the regulators and police try to prove your validity. Or even worse, while the raiders come inside your house, tear the walls down, and look for signs of suspicious activity. Private property laws are suspended on raid nights. Pretty much every law is suspended on raid nights. We've all heard horror stories: pregnant women stripped down and probed in front of everybody, people thrown in jail for 2 or 3 years just for looking at a policeman the wrong way, or for trying to prevent a regulator from entering a certain room. This is a raid. If you are asked to step out of the house, please make sure you have all your identification papers in hand, including the papers of any children over the age of 6 months. Anyone who resists will be detained and questioned. Anyone who delays will be charged with obstruction. At the end of the street. Then a few houses away. Then 2 houses away. No. Next door. I hear the Richardsons' dog start barking furiously. Then Mrs. Richardson, apologizing. More barking, then someone, a regulator, mutters something, and I hear a few heavy thuds and a whimper, then someone else saying, "You don't have to kill the damn thing," and someone else saying, "Why not? Probably has fleas, anyway." Then for a while there's quiet, just the occasional cackle of walkie-talkies, someone reciting identification numbers into a phone, the shuffling of papers. Then, all right, then. You're in the clear. And the boots start up again. For all their nonchalance, even Rachel and Carol tense up as the boots clomp by our house. I can see Carol gripping her coffee cup tightly, knuckles white. My heart is jumping and skipping, a grasshopper in my chest. But the boots pass us by. Rachel heaves out an audible sigh of relief as we hear the regulators pound on a door farther down the street. Open up. This is a raid. Carol's teacup clatters in its saucer, making me jump. Silly, isn't it? She says, forcing a laugh. Even when you haven't done anything wrong, it still makes you jumpy. I feel a dull pain in my hand and realize I'm still holding on to the counter as though it's going to save my life. I can't relax, can't calm down, even as the sounds of the footsteps grow fainter, the bullhorn voice more and more distorted, until it is completely unintelligible. All I can picture are the raiding parties, sometimes as many as 50 in a single night, swirling around Portland, swarming it, surrounding it like water cascading around a whirlpool, sweeping up anyone and everyone they can find and accuse of misbehavior or disobedience, and even people they can't. Somewhere out there Hannah is dancing, spinning, blonde hair fanning out behind her, smiling, while around her boys are pressing clothes and unapproved music pumps through the speakers. I fight a feeling of incredible nausea. I don't even want to think about what will happen to her, to all of them, if they're caught. All I can do is hope she hasn't made it to the party yet. Maybe she took too long to get ready. It seems possible. Hannah's always late and was still at home when the raid started. Even Hannah would never venture outside during raids. It's suicide. But Angelica Marston and everyone else. Every single person there. Everyone who just wanted to hear some music. I think about what Alex said the night I ran into him at Roaring Brook Farms. I came to hear the music, like everybody else. I will the image out of my mind and tell myself, it's not my problem. I should be happy if the party is raided and everyone there is busted. What they're doing is dangerous, not just for them but for all of us. That's how the disease gets in. But the underneath part of me, the stubborn part that said gray at my first evaluation, keeps pressing and nagging at me. So what? It says. So they wanted to hear some music. Some real music, not the dinky little songs that get tooted out at the Portland concert series, all boring rhythms and bright, chipper notes. They're not doing anything that bad. Then I remember the other thing Alex said, nobody's hurting anybody. Besides, there's always the possibility that Hannah didn't run late tonight, and she's out there, oblivious as the raids circle closer and closer. I have to squeeze my eyes shut against the God, and against the God of dozens of glittering blades descending on her. If she's not thrown in jail, she'll be carted directly to the lab. She'll be cured before dawn, regardless of the dangers or risks. Somehow, despite my racing thoughts and the fact that the room continues its frantic spinning, I've managed to clean all the dishes. I've also come to a decision. I have to go. I have to warn her. I have to warn all of them. By the time Rachel and David leave and everyone is settled in bed, it's midnight. Every second that passes feels like agony. I can only hope the door-to-door on Peninsula is taking longer than usual, and it will be a while before the raiders make it to Deering Highlands. Maybe they've decided to skip the Highlands altogether. Given the fact that the majority of the houses up there are vacant, it's always a possibility. Still, since Deering Highlands used to be the hotbed of resistance in Portland, it seems doubtful. I slip out of bed, not bothering to change out of my sleep pants and t-shirt, both of which are black. Then I put on black flats and, even though it's about 1,000 degrees, pull a black ski hat out of the closet. Can't be too careful tonight. Just as I'm about to crack open the bedroom door, I hear a small noise behind me, like the mewing of a cat. I whip around. Grace is sitting up in bed, watching me. For a second, we just stare at each other. If Grace makes a noise or gets out of bed, or does anything, she's bound to wake Jenny and then I'm done, finished, kaput. I'm trying to think of what I can say to reassure her, trying to fabricate a lie, but then, miracle of miracles, she just lies back down in bed and closes her eyes. And even though it's very dark, I would swear that there's the smallest smile on her face. I feel a quick rush of relief. One good thing about the fact that Gracie refuses to speak. I know she won't tell on me. I slip out into the street without any other problems, even remembering to skip the third to last stair, which last time let out such an awful squeak I got for sure Carol would wake up. After the noise and the commotion of the raids, the street is freakily still and quiet. Every single window is dark, all the blinds drawn, like the houses are trying to turn away from the street or put up their shoulders against prying eyes. A stray piece of red paper sweeps by me, turning on the wind like the tumbleweed you see in old cowboy movies. I recognize it as a raider's notice, a proclamation filled with impossible to pronounce words explaining the legality of suspending everyone's rights for the evening. Other than that, it could be any other night, any other quiet, dead, ordinary night. Except that on the wind just faintly, you can hear the distant murmur of footsteps, and a high wail as if someone is crying. The sounds are so quiet you might almost mistake them for ocean and wind sounds. Almost. The raiders have moved on. I start off quickly in the direction of Deering Highlands. I'm too afraid to take my bike. I'm worried the little reflective patch on the wheels will attract too much attention. I can't think about what I'm doing, can't think about the consequences if I'm caught. I don't know where I even got this rush of resolution. I never would have thought I'd have the courage to leave the house on a raid night, not in a million years. I guess Hannah was wrong about me. I guess I'm not scared all the time. I'm passing a black trash bag heaped on the sidewalk when a low whimper stops me short. I spin around, my whole body on high alert in an instant. Nothing. The sound is repeated, an eerie crooning sound that makes the hair on my arm stand up. Then the garbage bag by my feet shakes itself. No. Not a garbage bag. It's Riley, the Richardson's black mutt. I take a few shaky steps toward him. I need only one glance to know that he's dying. He's completely coated with a sticky, shiny black substance, blood, I realize as I get closer. That's the reason I mistook his fur in the dark for the slick black surface of a plastic bag. One of his eyes is pressed to the pavement. The other is open. His head has been clubbed in. Blood is flowing freely from his nose, black and viscous. I think of the voice I heard probably has fleas, anyway, the regulator said, and the swift cutting sound that followed. Riley is staring at me with a look so mournful and accusatory I swear for a second it's like he's a human and he's trying to tell me something, trying to say, "You did this to me." A wave of nausea overtakes me and I'm tempted to get down on my knees and scoop him up in my arms or strip off my clothes and start soaking the blood off him. But at the same time I feel paralyzed. I can't move. As I'm standing there, frozen, he gives a long shuddering jerk, from the tip of his tail to his nose. Then he goes still. Instantly my arms and legs unfreeze. I stumble backward, bile pushing itself up into my mouth. I careen in a full circle, feeling like I did the day I got drunk with Hannah, totally out of control of my own body. Anger and disgust are shredding through me, making me want to scream. I find a flattened cardboard box sitting behind a dumpster and drag it over to Riley's body, covering him completely. I try not to think of the insects that will tear into him by morning. I'm surprised to feel tears prick at my eyes. I wipe them away with the back of my arm. But as I start off toward Deering, all I can think is, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, like a mantra or a prayer. One good thing about raids, they're loud. All I have to do is pause in the shadows and listen for the footsteps, the static, the bullhorn voices. I switch directions, choose the side streets, the ones that have been skipped over or raided already. Evidence of the raids is everywhere, overturned garbage cans and dumpsters, trash picked through and spilled out onto the street, mountains of old receipts and shredded letters and rotting vegetables and foul-smelling goop I don't even want to identify, red notices coating everything like a dust. My shoes get slick from clomping over it, and in the worst places I have to keep my arms out like a tightrope walker just to stay on my feet. I pass a few houses marked with a big X, black paint splashed across their walls and windows like a black gash, and my stomach sinks. The people who live in these houses have been identified as troublemakers or resistors. The hot wind whistling through the streets carries sounds of yelling and crying, dogs barking. I do my best not to think about Riley. I stick to the shadows, slipping in and out of alleys, and darting from one dumpster to the next. Sweat is pooling at the base of my neck and under my arms, and it's not just from the heat. Everything looks strange and grotesque and distorted, certain streets glittering with glass from smashed windows, the smell of burning in the air. At one point, I come around a corner onto Forest Avenue just as a group of regulators turns onto it from the other end. I whip back around, pressing flat against the wall of a hardware store, and inching back in the direction I've come. The chances any of the regulators saw me are slim. I was a block away, and it's pitch black, but still, my heart never goes back to its normal pace. I feel like I'm playing some giant video game, or trying to solve a really complicated math equation. One girl is trying to avoid 40 raiding parties of between 15 to 20 people each, spread out across a radius of 7 miles. If she has to make it 2.7 miles through the center, what is the probability she will wake up tomorrow morning in a jail cell? Please feel free to round pi to 3.14. Before the shakedown, Deering Highlands was a nicer part of Portland. The houses were big and new, at least for Maine, which means they were built within the past 100 years and set back behind gates and hedges on streets with names like Lilac Way and Timber Road. There are a few families still clinging on in some of the houses, dirt poor ones who can't afford to move anywhere else or haven't gotten permission for a new residence, but for the most part it's totally empty. Nobody wanted to stay on. Nobody wanted to be associated with the resistance. The weirdest thing about Deering Highlands is how quickly it was abandoned. There are still rusting toys scattered among the grass and cars parked in some of the driveways, though most of them have been picked apart, cleaned of metal and plastic like corpses scavenged by enormous buzzards. The whole area has the forlorn look of an abandoned animal, houses drooping slowly into the overgrown lawns. Normally I get freaked out just being in the vicinity of the Highlands. A lot of people say it's bad luck, like passing a graveyard without holding your breath. But tonight, when I finally make it there, I feel like I could dance a jig on the sidewalk. Everything is dark and quiet and undisturbed, not a single raider's notice to be seen, not a whisper of conversation or the brush of a heel on a sidewalk. The raiders haven't come yet. Maybe they won't come at all. I speed quickly through the streets, picking up the pace now that I don't have to worry so much about sticking to the shadows and moving soundlessly. Deering Highlands is pretty big, a maze of winding streets that all look weirdly similar, houses looming out of the darkness like ships run aground. The lawns have all gone wild over the years, trees stretching their gnarled branches to the sky and casting crazy zigzag shadows on the moonlit pavement. I get lost on Lilac Way. Somehow I manage to make a complete circle and wind up hitting the same intersection twice, but when I turn onto Tanglewilde Lane I see a dull light burning dimly in the distance behind a knotted mass of trees, and I know I found the place. An old mailbox is staked crookedly in the ground next to the driveway. A black X is still faintly visible on one of its sides. 42 Tanglewilde Lane. I can see why they've chosen this house for the party. It's set back pretty far from the road, and surrounded on all sides by trees so dense I can't help but think of the dark and whispering woods on the far side of the border. Walking up the driveway is creepy. I keep my eyes focused on the fuzzy pale light of the house, which expands and brightens slowly as I get closer, eventually resolving into 2 lit windows. The windows have been covered with some kind of fabric, maybe to hide the fact that there are people inside. It isn't working. I can see shadow people moving back and forth inside the house. The music is very quiet. It's not until I make it onto the porch that I hear it at all, faint, muffled strains that seem to vibrate up from the floorboards. There must be a basement. I've been rushing to arrive, but I hesitate with my hand on the front door, my palm slick with sweat. I haven't given much thought to how I'll get everyone out. If I just start screaming about a raid, it will cause a panic. Everyone will stream into the streets at once, and then the chances of getting home undetected go to 0. Someone will hear something. The raiders will catch on, and then we'll all be screwed. I do a mental correction. They'll be screwed. I am not like these people on the other side of the door. I'm not them. But then I think of Riley shuddering, going limp. I am not those people either, the ones who did that, the ones who watched. Even the Richardsons didn't bother trying to save him, their own dog. They didn't even cover him up as he was dying. I would never do that. Never, ever, ever. Not even if I had a million procedures. He was alive. He had a heartbeat and blood and breath, and they left him there like trash. They. Me. Us. Them. The words ricochet in my head. I palm my hands on the back of my pants and open the door. Hannah said this party would be smaller, but to me it seems even more crowded than the last one, maybe because the rooms are tiny and totally packed. They are filled with a choking curtain of cigarette smoke, which shimmers over everything and makes it look as though everyone is swimming underwater. It's deathly hot in here, at least 10 degrees hotter than it was outside. People move slowly and have rolled up their short sleeves above the shoulders, tugged their jeans to their knees, and wherever there is skin, there is a glistening sheen on it. For a moment I can only stand there and watch. I wish I had a camera. If I ignore the fact that there are hands touching hands and bodies bumping together and 1,000 things that are terrible and wrong, I can see that it's kind of beautiful. Then I realize I'm wasting time. There's a girl standing directly in front of me, blocking my way. She has her back to me. I reach out and put a hand on her arm. Her skin is so hot it burns. She turns to me, face red and flushed, craning her head backward to hear. It's a raid night, I say to her, surprised that my voice comes out so steady. The music is soft but insistent. It's definitely coming up from a basement of some kind, not as crazy as the last time, but just as strange and just as gorgeous. It reminds me of warm, dripping things, honey and sunlight and red leaves swirling down on the wind. But the layers of conversation, the creakings of footsteps and floorboards, make it difficult to hear. What? She sweeps her hair away from her ear. I open my mouth to say raid, but instead of my voice it's someone else's that comes out, an enormous, mechanical voice bellowing from outside, a voice that seems to shake and rattle from all sides at once, a voice that cuts through the warmth and the music like a cold razor edge through skin. At the same time the room starts spinning, a swirling mass of red and white lights revolving over terrified, stunned faces. Attention. This is a raid. Do not try to run. Do not try to resist. This is a raid. A few seconds later, the door explodes inward and a spotlight as bright as the sun turns everything white and motionless, turns everything to dust and statue. Then they let the dogs loose. Chapter 14. Human beings in their natural state are unpredictable, erratic and unhappy. It is only once their animal instincts are controlled that they can be responsible, dependable, and content. The Book of Shhhp. 31. I once saw a news report about a brown bear that had accidentally been punctured by its trainer at the Portland circus during routine training. I was really young, but I'll never forget the way the bear looked, an enormous dark blob tearing around its circle with a ridiculous red paper hat still flopping crazily from its head, ripping into whatever it could get its jaws around, paper streamers, folding chairs, balloons. Its trainer too, the bear mauled him, turned his face into hamburger meat. The worst part, the part I've never forgotten, was its panicked roaring, a horrible, continuous enraged bellow that sounded somehow human. That's what I remember as the raiders start flooding the house, pouring in through the shattered door, battering on the windows. That's what I think of as the music cuts off suddenly and instead the air is full of barking and screaming and shattering glass, as hot hands push me from the front and from the side, and I catch an elbow under my chin and another one in my ribs. I remember the bear. Somehow I've surged forward in the panicked crowd that is flowing and scrabbling toward the back of the house. Behind me I hear dogs snapping their jaws and regulators swinging heavy clubs. People are screaming, so many people it sounds like a single voice. A girl falls behind me, stumbling forward and reaching for me as one of the regulators' batons catches her on the back of the head with a sickening crack. I feel her fingers tighten momentarily on the cotton of my shirt and I shake her off and keep running, pushing, squeezing forward. I have no time to be sorry, and no time to be scared. I have no time to do anything but move, push, go, can't think of anything but escape, escape, escape. The strange thing is that for a minute in the middle of all that noise and confusion, I see things super clearly, in slow motion like I'm watching a film from a distance. I see a guard dog make a leap for a guy to my left. I see his knees buckle as he topples forward with the barest, tiniest noise like a breath or a sigh, a crescent of blood spattering up from his neck, where the dog's teeth tear into him. A girl with flashing blonde hair goes down under the raiders' clubs, and as I see the arc of her hair for a second my heart goes totally still and I think I've died. I think it's all over. Then she twists her head my way, shouting as the regulators get her with pepper spray, and I see that she isn't Hannah, and relief rushes through me, a wave. More snapshots. A movie, only a movie. Not happening, could never really happen. A boy and a girl fighting to make it into one of the side rooms, maybe thinking there's an exit that way. The door is too small for both of them to enter at once. He is wearing a blue shirt that reads Portland Naval Conservatory, and she has long red hair, bright as a flame. Only 5 minutes ago they were talking and laughing together, standing so close that if one of them had even tipped forward accidentally they might have kissed. Now they wrestle, but she is too small. She locks her teeth on his arm like a dog, like a wild thing. He roars, rages, grabs her by the shoulders and slams her back against the wall, out of the way. She stumbles, falls, slipping, trying to stand up. One of the raiders, an enormous man with the reddest face I've ever seen, reaches down, knots his fingers around her ponytail, and hauls her to her feet. Naval Conservatory doesn't get away either. 2 raiders follow him, and as I run by I hear the gut of their clubs, the mangled sound of screaming. Animals, I think. We're animals. People are shoving, pulling, using one another as shields as the raiders keep gaining, surging forward, swinging at us, dogs at our heels, batons whirling so close to my head I can feel the air whooshing on my neck as the wood twirls near the back of my skull. I think of searing pain. I think of red. The crowd is thinning around me as the raiders advance. One by one people are screaming next to me, crack and dropping, getting wrestled to the ground by 3, 4, 5 dogs. Screaming. Everyone screaming. Somehow I've managed to avoid being caught and I'm still rocketing through the narrow, creaking hallways, passing a blur of rooms, a blur of people and raiders, more lights, more shattered windows, the sound of engines. They've got the place surrounded. And then the open back door rises up in front of me and beyond it dark trees, the cool and whispering woods behind the house. If I can make it outside. If I can hide from the lights for long enough. I hear a dog barking behind me and behind that a raider's pounding footsteps, gaining, a sharp voice yelling stop. And I suddenly realize I'm alone in the hallway. 15 more steps. Then 10. If I can make it into the darkness. 5 feet from the door and sudden, shooting pain rips through my leg. The dog has got its jaws around my calf and I turn and that's when I see him, the regulator with the massive red face, eyes glittering, smiling. Oh God, he's smiling, he actually enjoys this club raised ready to swing. I close my eyes, think of pain as big as the ocean, think of a blood-red sea. Think of my mother. Then I'm being jerked to the side, and I hear a crack and a yelp, the regulator saying shit. The fire in my leg stops and the weight of the dog falls off and there's an arm around my waist and a voice in my ear, a voice so familiar in that moment it's like I've been waiting for it all along, like I've been hearing it forever in my dreams, breathing out this way. Alex keeps one arm around my waist, half carrying me. We're in a different hallway now, this one smaller and totally empty. Every time I put weight on my right leg the pain flares up again, searing all the way into my head. The raider is still behind us and pissed. Alex must have pulled me to safety at just the right second, so the raider cracked down on his dog instead of my skull and I know I must be slowing Alex down, but he doesn't let me go, not for a second. In here, he says, and then we're ducking into another room. We must be in a part of the house that wasn't being used for the party. This room is pitch black although Alex doesn't slow down at all, just keeps going through the dark. I let the pressure of his fingertips guide me left, right. It smells like mold in here, and something else, fresh paint almost, and something smoky, like someone's been cooking here. But that's impossible. These houses have been empty for years. Behind us the raider is struggling in the dark. He bumps up against something and curses. A second later something crashes to the ground. Glass shatters. More cursing. From the sound of his voice I can tell that he's falling behind. Up, Alex whispers, so quiet and so close it's like I've only imagined it, and just like that he is lifting me and I realize I'm going out a window, feel the rough wood of the windowsill grate against my back, land on my good foot on the soft, damp grass outside. A second later Alex follows soundlessly, materializing beside me in the dark. Though the air is hot, a breeze has picked up, and as it sweeps across my skin I could cry from gratitude and relief. But we're not safe yet, far from it. The darkness is mobile, twisting alive with paths of light, flashlights cut through the woods to our right and left, and in their glare I see fleeing figures, lit up like ghosts, frozen for a moment in the beams. The screams continue, some only a few feet away, some so distant and forlorn you could mistake them for something else, for owls, maybe hooting peacefully in their trees. Then Alex has taken my hand, and we're running again. Every step on my right foot is a fire, a blade. I bite the inside of my cheeks to keep from crying out, and taste blood. Chaos. Scenes from hell, floodlights from the road, shadows falling, bone cracking, voices shattering apart, dissolving into silence. In here. I do what he says without hesitating. A tiny wooden shed has appeared miraculously in the dark. It's falling apart, and so overgrown with moss and climbing vines that even from a distance of only a few feet it appeared to be a tangle of bushes and trees. I have to stoop to get inside, and when I do the smell of animal urine and wet dog is so strong I almost gag. Alex comes in behind me and shuts the door. I hear a rustling and see him kneeling, stuffing a blanket in the gap between the door and the ground. The blanket must be the source of the smell. It absolutely reeks. God, I whisper, the first thing I've said to him, cupping my hand over my mouth and nose. This way the dogs won't pick up our scent, he whispers back matter-of-factly. I've never met someone so calm in my life. I think fleetingly that maybe the stories I heard when I was little were true, maybe invalids really are monstrous freaks. Then I feel ashamed. He just saved my life. He saved my life from the raiders. From the people who are supposed to protect us and keep us safe. From the people who are supposed to keep us safe from the people like Alex. Nothing makes sense anymore. My head is spinning, and I feel dizzy. I stumble, bumping against the wall behind me, and Alex reaches up to steady me. Sit down, he says in that same commanding voice he has been using all along. It's comforting to listen to his low, forceful directives to let myself go. I lower myself to the ground. The floor is damp and rough underneath me. The moon must have broken through the clouds. Gaps in the walls and roof let in little spots of silvery light. I can just make out some shelves beyond Alex's head, a set of cans paint maybe. Piled in one corner. Now that Alex and I are both sitting, there's hardly any room left to maneuver. The whole structure is only a few feet wide. I'm going to take a look at your leg now, okay? He's still whispering. I nod okay. Even when I'm sitting down, the dizziness doesn't subside. He sits up on his knees and draws my leg into his lap. It's not until he begins rolling up my pant leg that I feel how wet the fabric is against my skin. I must be bleeding. I bite my lip and press my back up hard against the wall, expecting it to hurt, but the feeling of his hands against my skin cool and strong somehow dampens everything, sliding across the pane like an eclipse blotting the moon dark. Once he has my pants rolled up to the knee, he tilts me gently, so he can see the back of my calf. I lean one elbow on the floor, feeling the room sway. I must be bleeding a lot. He exhales sharply, a quick sound between his teeth. Is it bad? I say, too afraid to look. Hold still, he says. And I know that it is bad, but he won't tell me so, and in that moment I'm so flooded with gratitude for him and hatred for the people outside, hunters, primitives, with their sharp teeth and heavy sticks. The air goes out of me, and I have to struggle to breathe. Alex reaches into a corner of the shed without removing my leg from his lap. He fiddles with a box of some kind and metal latches creak open. A second later he's hovering over my leg with a bottle. This is going to burn for a second, he says. Liquid splatters my skin, and the astringent smell of alcohol makes my nostrils flare. Flames lick up my leg, and I nearly scream. Alex reaches out a hand, and without thinking I take it and squeeze. What is that? I force out through gritted teeth. Rubbing alcohol, he says. Prevents infection. How did you know it was here? I ask, but he doesn't answer. He draws his hand away from mine and I realize I've been grabbing onto him hard. But I don't have the energy to be embarrassed or afraid. The room seems to be pulsing, the half-darkness growing fuzzier. Shit, Alex mutters. You're really bleeding. It doesn't hurt that much, I whisper, which is a lie. But he's so calm, so together, it makes me want to act brave too. Everything has taken on a strange, distant quality. The sounds of running and shouting outside get warped and weird, like they're being filtered through water, and Alex looks miles away. I start to think I might be dreaming, or about to pass out. And then I decide I'm definitely dreaming, because as I'm watching, Alex starts peeling his shirt off over his head. What are you doing? I almost scream. Alex finishes shaking loose the shirt and begins tearing the fabric into long strips, shooting a nervous glance at the door and pausing to listen every time the cloth goes rip-pee. I've never in my whole life seen a guy without a shirt on, except for really little kids or from a distance on the beach when I've been too afraid to look for fear of getting in trouble. Now I can't stop staring. The moonlight just touches his shoulder blades so they glow slightly like wingtips, like pictures of angels I've seen in textbooks. He's thin but muscular too. When he moves I can make out the lines of his arms and chest, so strangely, incredibly beautifully different from a girl's, a body that makes me think of running and being outside, of warmth and sweating. Heat starts beating through me, a thrumming feeling like 1,000 tiny birds have been released in my chest. I'm not sure if it's from the bleeding, but the room feels like it's spinning so fast we're in danger of flying out of it, both of us getting thrown out into the night. Before Alex seemed far away. Now the room is full of him. He is so close I can't breathe, can't move, or speak or think. Every time he brushes me with his fingers, time seems to teeter for a second, like it is in danger of dissolving. The whole world is dissolving, I decide, except for us. Us. Hey. He reaches out and touches my shoulder, just for a second, but in that second my body shrinks down to that single point of pressure under his hand and glows with warmth. I've never felt like this, so calm and peaceful. Maybe I'm dying. The idea doesn't really upset me for some reason. In fact, it seems kind of funny. You okay? Fine. I start to giggle softly. You're naked. What? Even in the dark I can tell he's squinting at me. I've never seen a boy like that. With no shirt on. Not up close. He begins wrapping the shredded t-shirt around my leg, carefully tying it tight. The dog got you good, he says. But this should stop the bleeding. The phrase "stop the bleeding" sounds so clinical and scary it snaps me awake and helps me to focus. Alex finishes tying off the makeshift bandage. Now the searing pain in my leg has been replaced by a dull, throbbing pressure. Alex lifts my leg carefully out of his lap and rests it on the ground. Okay. He says, and I nod. Then he scoots around next to me, leaning back against the wall like I am, so we're sitting side by side, arms just touching at the elbows. I can feel the heat coming off his bare skin, and it makes me feel hot. I close my eyes and try not to think about how close we are, or what it would feel like to run my hands over his shoulders and chest. Outside, the sounds of the raid grow more and more distant, the screams fewer, the voices fainter. The raiders must be passing on. I say a silent prayer that Hannah managed to escape. The possibility that she didn't is too terrible to contemplate. Still, Alex and I don't move. I'm so tired I feel like I could sleep forever. Home seems impossibly, incomprehensibly far away, and I don't see how I'll ever make it back. Alex starts speaking all at once, his voice a low, urgent rush. Listen, Lena. What happened at the beach? I'm really sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't want to frighten you away. You don't have to explain, I say. But I want to explain. I want you to know that I didn't mean to. Listen, I cut him off. I'm not going to tell anyone, okay? I'm not going to get you in trouble or anything. He pauses. I feel him turn to look at me, but I keep my eyes fixed on the darkness in front of us. I don't care about that, he says lower. Another pause and then, I just don't want you to hate me. Again the room seems to be shrinking, closing in around us. I can feel his eyes on me like the hot pressure of touch, but I'm too afraid to look at him. I'm afraid that if I do I'll lose myself in his eyes, forget all the things I'm supposed to say. Outside, the woods have fallen silent. The raiders must have left. After a second the crickets begin singing all at once, warbling throatily, a great swelling of sound. Why do you care? I say, barely a whisper. I told you, he whispers back. I can feel his breath just tickling the space behind my ear, making the hair prick up on my neck. I like you. You don't know me, I say quickly. I want to though. The room is spinning more and more quickly. I press up more firmly against the wall, trying to steady myself against the feeling of dizzying movement. It's impossible, he has an answer for everything. It's too quick. It must be a trick. I press my palms against the damp floor, taking comfort in the solidity of the rough wood. Why me? I don't mean to ask it, but the words slide out. I'm nobody. I want to say, I'm nobody special, but the words dry up in my mouth. This is what I imagine it feels like to climb to the top of a mountain, where the air is so thin you can inhale and inhale and inhale and still feel like you can't take a breath. Alex doesn't answer, and I realize he doesn't have an answer, just like I suspected. There's no reason for it at all. He's picked me at random, as a joke, or because he knew I'd be too scared to tell on him. But then he starts speaking. His story is so rapid and fluid you can tell he has got about it a lot, the kind of story you tell over and over to yourself until the edges get all smoothed over. I was born in the wilds. My mother died right afterward. My father's dead. He never knew he had a son. I lived there for the first part of my life, just kind of bouncing around. All the other. He hesitates slightly, and I can hear the grimace in his voice. Invalids took care of me together. Like a community thing. Outside, the crickets pause temporarily in their song. For a second it's like nothing bad has happened, like nothing has happened tonight out of the ordinary at all, just another hot and lazy summer night, waiting for morning to peel it back. Pain knifes through me in that moment, but it has nothing to do with my leg. It strikes me how small everything is, our whole world, everything with meaning, our stores and our raids and our jobs and our lives, even. Meanwhile the world just goes on the same as always, night cycling into day and back into night, an endless circle. Seasons shifting and reforming like a monster, shaking off its skin and growing it again. Alex keeps talking. I came into Portland when I was 10 to join up with the resistance here. I won't tell you how. It was complicated. I got an ID number. I got a new last name and new home address. There are more of us than you think, invalids and sympathizers, 2 more of us than anybody knows. We have people in the police force, and all the municipal departments. We have people in the labs even. Goosebumps pop up all over my arms when he says this. My point is that it's possible to get in and out. Difficult, but possible. I moved in with 2 stranger sympathizers, both of them, and was told to call them my aunt and uncle. He shrugs ever so slightly next to me. I didn't care. I'd never known my real parents, and I'd been raised by dozens of different aunts and uncles. It didn't make a difference to me. His voice has gotten super quiet, and he seems almost to have forgotten that I'm there. I'm not exactly sure where his story is going, but I hold my breath, afraid that if I even so much as exhale he'll stop speaking entirely. I hated it here. I hated it here so much you can't even imagine. All the buildings and the people looking so dazed, and the smells and the closeness of everything, and the rules everywhere you turn, rules and walls, rules and walls. I wasn't used to it. I felt like I was in a cage. We are in a cage, a bordered cage. A little shock pulses through me. In all the 17 years and 11 months of my life I have never, not once, thought of it that way. I've been so used to thinking of what the borders are keeping out that I haven't considered that they're also penning us in. Now I see it through Alex's eyes, see what it must have been like for him. At first I was angry. I used to light things on fire. Paper handbooks, school primers. It made me feel better somehow. He laughed softly. I even burned my copy of the Book of SHHH. Another shock pulses through me, defacing or destroying the Book of SHHH is sacrilege. I used to walk along the borders for hours every day. Sometimes I cried. He squirms next to me, and I can tell he's embarrassed. It's the first sign he has given in a while that he knows I'm still there, that he's talking to me, and the urge to reach out and grab his hand to squeeze him or give him some kind of reassurance is almost overwhelming. But I keep my hands glued to the floor. After a while, though, I would just walk. I liked to watch the birds. They would lift off from our side and soar over into the wilds as easily as anything. Back and forth, lifting and curling through the air. I could watch them for hours at a time. Free, they were totally free. I'd got that nothing and nobody was free in Portland, but I was wrong. There were always the birds. He falls silent for a while, and I think maybe he's done with his story. I wonder if he's forgotten about my original question, why me? But I'm too embarrassed to remind him, so I just sit there and imagine him standing at the border motionless, watching the birds swoop above his head. It calms me down. After what seems like forever he starts talking again, this time in a voice so quiet I have to shift nearer to him just to hear. The first time I saw you at the Governor, I hadn't been to watch the birds at the border in years. But that's what you reminded me of. You were jumping up, and you were yelling something, and your hair was coming loose from your ponytail, and you were so fast. He shakes his head. Just a flash, and then you were gone. Exactly like a bird. I don't know how I hadn't intended to move and hadn't noticed moving, but somehow we've ended up face to face in the dark, only inches apart. Everyone is asleep. They've been asleep for years. You seemed awake. Alex is whispering now. He closes his eyes, opens them again. I'm tired of sleeping. My insides are lifting and fluttering like they've done what he said and been transformed into swooping, soaring birds. The rest of my body seems to be floating away on massive currents of warmth, as though a hot wind is pushing through me, breaking me apart, turning me to air. This is wrong, a voice says inside of me, but it isn't my voice. It's someone else's, some composite of my aunt and Rachel, and all my teachers and the pinchy evaluator who asked most of the questions the second time around. Out loud I squeak, no, even though another word is rising and lifting inside of me, bubbling up like fresh water sprung from the earth. Yes, yes, yes. Why? He's barely whispering. His hands find my face, his fingertips barely skim my forehead, the top of my ears, the hollows of my cheeks. Everywhere he touches is fire. My whole body is burning up, the two of us becoming twin points of the same bright white flame. What are you afraid of? You have to understand. I just want to be happy. I can barely get the words out. My mind is a haze, full of smoke, nothing exists but his fingers dancing and skating over my skin through my hair. I wish it would stop. I want it to go on forever. I just want to be normal like everybody else. Are you sure that being like everybody else will make you happy? The barest whisper. His breath on my ear and neck, his mouth grazing my skin. And I think then I might really have died. Maybe the dog bit me and I got clubbed on the head, and this is all just a dream. The rest of the world has dissolved. Only him. Only me. Only us. I don't know any other way. I can't feel my mouth open, don't feel the words come, but there they are, floating on the dark. He says, let me show you. And then we're kissing. Or at least, I think we're kissing. I've only seen it done a couple of times, quick closed mouth pecks at weddings or on formal occasions. But this isn't like anything I've ever seen, or imagined, or even dreamed. This is like music or dancing, but better than both. His mouth is slightly open, so I open mine too. His lips are soft, the same soft pressure as the quietly insistent voice in my head that keeps saying yes. The warmth is only growing inside of me, waves of light swelling and breaking and making me feel like I'm floating. His fingers lace my hair, cup my neck and the back of my head, skim over my shoulders, and without thinking about it or meaning to, my hands find his chest, move over the heat of his skin, the bones of his shoulder blades like wingtips, the curve of his jaw, just doubled with hair, all of it strange and unfamiliar and gloriously, deliciously new. My heart is drumming in my chest so hard it aches, but it's the good kind of ache, like the feeling you get on the first day of real autumn when the air is crisp and the leaves are all flaring at the edges and the wind smells just vaguely of smoke, like the end and the beginning of something all at once. Under my hand I swear I can feel his heart beating out a response, an immediate echo of mine, as though our bodies are speaking to each other. And suddenly it's all so ridiculously and stupidly clear I feel like laughing. This is what I want. This is the only thing I've ever wanted. Everything else, every single second of every single day that has come before this very moment, this kiss has meant nothing. When he finally pulls away, it's like a blanket has come down over my brain, quieting all my buzzing thoughts and questions, filling me with a calm and happiness as deep and cool as snow. The only word left there is yes. Yes to everything. I really like you, Lena. Do you believe me now? Yes. Can I walk you home? Yes. Can I see you tomorrow? Yes, yes, yes. The streets are empty by now. The whole city is silent and still. The whole city might have wound down into nothing, burned away while we were in the shed, and I wouldn't have noticed or cared. The walk home is fuzzy a dream. He holds my hand the whole way and we stop to kiss twice again in the longest, deepest shadows we can find. Both times I wish the shadows were solid had weight, and they would fold down around us and bury us there so we could stay like that forever, chest to chest, lip to lip. Both times I feel my chest seize up when he pulls away and takes my hand and we have to start walking again, not kissing, like suddenly I can only breathe correctly when we are. Somehow too soon I'm home and whispering goodbye to him and feeling his lips brush mine one last time, as light as wind. Then I'm sneaking into the house and up the stairs and into the bedroom, and it's not until I've been lying in bed for a long time shivering, aching, missing him already that I realize my aunt and my teachers and the scientists are right about the deliria. As I lie there with the hurt driving through my chest and the sick, anxious feeling churning through me and the desire for Alex so strong inside of me it's like a razor blade edging its way through my organs, shredding me, all I can think is, it will kill me, it will kill me, it will kill me. And I don't care. Chapter